Good morning and welcome to the OBX Wave Report for January the 12th, 2023. As we here in the Outer Banks are starting to experience the effects of a storm sweeping in through the Mississippi River Valley and into the eastern US, one that is expected to bring a frontal system across the Outer Banks over the coming 24 to 36 hours. And looking at the models, this frontal system is expected to spawn a coastal low off the Outer Banks, which is expected to track north for a little bit and then go retrograde as it gets blocked by a high pressure system and spin up some wind and waves. And the waves for the Outer Banks are expected to kick up a bit, getting into the range of 2 to 6 feet, according to some of the wave forecasts. And on the beaches, and then in the near coastal waters, looks like maybe 8 to 10, maybe 11 feet offshore at looking at some of the peak wave heights. So nothing too crazy, radically intense, but certainly some larger wave conditions here for the Outer Banks as the weather gets a little bit more rough. I did also want to announce a major change for my coverage. Lately, what we've been doing is blending climate big wave observations into the OBX wave report in a kind of global sense. I'm going to take the OBX wave report and refocus it down to a more local and regional level for the Outer Banks. And then we are going to do a special big wave climate and extreme weather roundup on, I don't know if it's going to be a daily basis, but considering that what happens globally affects things that are local, particularly here in the Outer Banks and on the coastline. And given my past focus on climate, I thought it would be good to do a daily climate and extreme weather roundup that included a big wave focus and give myself the freedom to go a little bit further afield and also deconfuse the OBX wave reports and also not to have to worry about having to do special editions every time there's like a major extreme weather event that may be potentially related to climate change somewhere in the lower 48 region or in the North Atlantic. And it would also give me the freedom to go a little bit further afield if something crazy were to happen. I don't know, say for example in the Arctic or in Southeast Asia or like any region of the globe where there's a potential for extreme weather related to climate change, where there's a potential impact for sea level rise, which certainly impacts the coastlines, and where there's a potential to just talk about trends that affect coastal communities and then also the ability to alert you to weather hotspots around the globe that are related to climate change. I believe we are still going to maintain our focus for the lower 48 and the North Atlantic primarily. But if things get really radical in another region of the world, I don't want to neglect it. So this big wave climate extreme weather roundup is going to give me the opportunity to liberate myself to do those things. And I am when available, whenever possible, I'll talk about how those impacts do affect the Outer Banks and other coastal communities as well. So let's get started with the OBX wave report for today for January the 12th. And we are again looking at the NOAA geocolor composite for the United States. And we do notice this huge swirl of clouds beginning to affect the eastern portion of the US. This weather feature is going to dominate the next 3 days, at least it looks like, as it sweeps on through and then becomes a oceanic system that will provide impacts for the Outer Banks, at least over the next 72-hour time frame. Looking at the colder cloud tops here provided by a tropical tidbits for the lower 48. We see continuing weather affecting the US West Coast, and I'll get into that a little bit later in our big wave climate and extreme weather roundup. And we do also see the swirl of clouds here just to the west of the Outer Banks. And it is beginning to sweep in and provide some, looks like some powerful storms starting to fire off in the let's see, that's in the like Mississippi River Valley region, moving in through Alabama, Mississippi, Kentucky, and heading off toward the Appalachians. This system is going to sweep on in, and it's going to get a little bit interesting weather-wise. We're going to get out on the roads and out on the beaches, and we're going to provide you some direct observations over the next few days. So that should be interesting as well. All right, so let's see, getting down to some more local observations for the beaches. We're going to start out at Jeanette's Pier as we do on a daily basis using uh, the Google Maps for some informational purposes here, just to give you guys, locational data. And looking at Jeanette's Pier right now, looking at the coastal observations, waves are in the range of about 1 foot. So rather small down there at Jeanette's Pier right now, very calm and placid. The wind's starting to kick up a little bit. Last night, the winds were in the range of about 4 to 5 miles per hour down there at Jeanette's Pier. Now the winds are kicking up to about 9 miles per hour out of the southwest. So the winds have shifted ahead of the front. We got that southwesterly flow, and that's beginning to change the nature of the surf already. Primary swell is at 9 seconds with those 1 foot waves, nothing really too rideable out there right now. And the secondary swell coming in at 13 seconds. Though the waves are not rideable right now, we do expect the wave conditions to start to improve over the next few days, so stay tuned. In any case, air temperatures have warmed up considerably. Right now, coming in at 58 degrees down there at Jeanette's Pier, and the ocean water temperature is still trending a little bit cooler as we head into the coldest time of year for ocean water temperatures. Ocean waters right now at Jeanette's Pier at 52 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty chilly. So make sure you've got your cold weather gear all lined up, your 3-4 millimeter wetsuit, your gloves, your hoodie, your booties, and all the good stuff to keep you nice and toasty out there in that cold North Atlantic in the wintertime. If you do want to get into those 1 foot waves, maybe save it for when the waves get better, or go to another location, and we're going to talk about other locations in a second. So weather conditions right now at Jeanette's Pier, cloudy to partly cloudy, with those southwest winds bringing those clouds from that storm system in. And the expected high today at Jeanette's Pier is 61 degrees Fahrenheit. Might get a little bit warmer. We'll see. We'll see how things pan out for the day down there at the beaches at Jeanette's Pier. It might get warmer than 61. It's pretty warm out there now. All right, so in any case, let's go on down the coastline we're going to go all the way down to Buxton. So going past Road Anthony and Avon and heading down to the beaches here at Buxton and just near Diamond Shoals. And right now what we see at Buxton are 1 to 2 foot waves. And this is the case for most of the more southerly east-facing beaches. So if you're looking at Road Anthony, wave conditions are likely in the range of 1 to 2 foot as well. And so Buxton waves are coming in at 1 to 2 foot. So a bit more rideable down there at Buxton. The primary swell is coming in at 9 seconds with a secondary swell coming in at 13 seconds. Winds are out of the southwest. So coming in at about this kind of angle here at 10 miles per hour, which is an offshore flow. Air temperatures are 64 degrees Fahrenheit down there at Buxton. Ocean water temperatures 62 degrees Fahrenheit, so warmer air and ocean conditions, although still cool enough for you to probably want to have your cold weather protection. Keep your hands and feet warm, keep them from getting all numb. You probably might not need a hoodie given those warm air temperatures and those ocean water temperatures in the 60s. Weather conditions are cloudy right now, with an expected high of 66 degrees Fahrenheit down there at Buxton. Again, might get a little warmer. We'll see how things pan out. I'd heard some predictions of temperatures in the lower 70s potentially for portions of the Outer Banks today as well. So better waves down there at Buxton, and then the best waves with those southwest winds that we can find on the Outer Banks, with the possible exception of Ocracoke. I actually didn't look at Ocracoke today, and maybe I should look at Ocracoke for tomorrow just to throw Ocracoke in there. I'm beginning to think that Ocracoke might be feeling a little neglected. So we'll possibly talk about Ocracoke tomorrow. Hopefully I'll remember that because the days are full here, which is a wonderful thing. But hopefully I'll remember. I won't have the absent-minded professor's disease strike again. But in any case, Billy Mitchell is the big wave spot for the Outer Banks today, or at least the regions that I've observed, at 2 to 3 feet. So waves coming in at Billy Mitchell Airport are father of the Air Force and enabler of the Air Force for use of defense of real freedom and democracy around the world. So we do salute Billy Mitchell's endeavors as we talk about the wonderful surf there in the range of 2 to 3 feet, coming in with a primary swell of 9 seconds and a secondary swell of 4 seconds. Winds with those 2 to 3 foot waves are out of the west winds are out of the southwest at 11 miles per hour. And with that southwest, so we got Billy Mitchell is south facing beach, and we got southwest winds here coming off the Atlantic, and that is an onshore flow. Air temperatures at Billy Mitchell Airport right now are in the range of 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Ocean water temperatures 61 degrees Fahrenheit, so a little bit different. A little bit cooler than Buxton. Buxton's a bit warmer, jutting out into the ocean there a little bit more, getting closer to the influence of the Gulf Stream, which is that toasty warm water current that creates this pool of warm air that's just offshore. And Buxton does get closer to that influence. And we see that in the weather variance between east to west there, as well as north to south. So air temperature 62 degrees, ocean water temperature 61. You're going to still want your cold weather gear. Maybe not, of course, as much as you do for the more northerly beaches, but take care to prevent hypothermia, please. And in any case, weather conditions down there at Billy Mitchell are cloudy with an expected high today of 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And generally across the Outer Banks, we would expect stormier conditions to start to sweep into the Outer Banks later today and into tonight, and possibly early into Saturday. I'm sorry, earlier into Friday, and running through Friday primarily, and possibly into Saturday as well. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the main event here, and where I'm going to back the models up so we can see the weather system. I'm going to change to total cloud water so we can see the clouds right now swirling across the eastern, the Ohio River Valley region of the United States, actually almost directly over the Ohio River. So you can see, and this is modeled cloud water, but it does give you an idea of where the clouds are and where the big clouds are and where the rains are. And right now we can see these powerful storms firing off in the Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, running into, looks like Ohio region, just south of the Great Lakes. And so this storm is expected to sweep onto the east. And let's go ahead and move the models here. It looks like we get a relatively decent low up there toward the Great Lakes. Strong frontal boundaries sweeping in across the Appalachians later today on Thursday. And then as we get into Friday, we get a strong front with looks like some pretty strong storms coming in here toward the Outer Banks. That could be interesting. We could have some really interesting weather observations here in the Outer Banks with this front. Weather here is dramatic. It's nothing it's nothing if not dramatic. So we might have some interesting weather observations for you as the leading edge of this front begins to sweep on in. And then looks like we get two impulses. Well, maybe, yeah, looks like another, yep, second impulse coming in as well. And then, so two impulses coming as a part of this frontal system looks like. And then we start to get like a little kink in the front as we head on into later in the day on Friday. It looks like we've got like a low pressure trying to develop off the Outer Banks, and then yeah, and then we get that looks like a low pressure, or at least a trough developing off the Outer Banks. And then I'm going to advance this more rapidly as we get low pressure off of New England, and then the trough deepens to the south, and we get some kind of a, here we go. And then by Saturday, we've got a fully formed low, looks like off of the mid-Atlantic. And this thing is expected to move in a kind of stalled way. It tends to stall out off of the mid-Atlantic and New England. And then in the models, it starts to go retrograde, which means it kind of backs up down toward the south and seems to try to go west, but primarily it just retrogrades down to the south. The prevailing motion of storms off the US East Coast is to move from southwest to northeast, tend to, and that just follows the upper air currents. But what's happening right now is further out in the Atlantic, we have a big old high pressure system here that is blocking up this storm, and then the storm low pressure system wants to go retrograde. And that's going to have some implication for waves for the Outer Banks. So let's go back to the wave models and look at the waves now. Right now, we've got waves in the near offshore environment of 2 to 3 feet. Let's go ahead and advance these models. By tomorrow, we get the influence of the frontal storm, and we get waves in the range of 6 to 9 feet in the near offshore environment. And then the front sweeps on through as we get into Saturday. And we still have some pretty strong waves off the Outer Banks, but the swell is starting to come in from the north with those northerly winds coming off the backside of a low pressure system that is developing off the mid-Atlantic here on Saturday with significant wave heights. Looks like in the range of 8 feet-ish off the eastern beaches, and then tamping down a bit off the south-facing beaches as that swell begins to come in from the north. And then as the low forms more prominently out here off of the mid-Atlantic and northeast, we get a pretty solid swell in the near offshore environment in the range of 8 to 9 feet on Sunday. And then that low hangs around as it just goes retrograde, dips down to the south, and we have that prevailing swell maintaining and possibly even kicking up a little bit through Sunday. And I believe we are getting to the end of our model here. So as we get into early in the day on Monday, the swell tamps down just a little bit, but not by much, even as the angle of the swell. Actually, it looks like it's about the same. So 6 to 9 foot significant wave heights in the near offshore environment. In the Outer Banks by Monday, with that retrograde low sinking down off the mid-Atlantic, almost directly, it looks like almost directly off Virginia Beach here. So right about here is where it is predicted to be in the global forecast system model. I'm going to go to air just so you can see the wind speeds with this thing. It's not expected to be too crazy. It looks like even in the close to the storm center, just pretty basic gale. So nothing too intense, at least right now, predicted in the models. We'll keep an eye on it, but for right now, it's looking like a gale off the U.S. East Coast, with winds coming in from the north and north-northwest, looks like, for the Outer Banks, kicking up that swell, but generally having a prevailing swell coming in from the northeast. And I'm going to just show you, I'm going to go ahead and show you the global forecast system model. We're going to back this up because this model has not, the most recent model has not fully loaded. So we're going to just back this up another 6 hours, and I'm just going to show you the storm that is predicted to run in through the east. sweep on offshore, the coastal low that forms and then goes retrograde. And looks like it does a little button hook as it goes up into Newfoundland there. So very interesting series of events expected from now until Monday, something to keep an eye on, and also some better surf from now until Monday as well. It is worth noting that generally for the US East and for the Outer Banks, conditions are expected to be warmer and stormier than normal. And so we could get more storms here in the Outer Banks and along the US East Coast as prevailing conditions tend to favor storms in the middle to long term. And I'm going to go ahead and show you some of these models where we get a storm sweeping in through the Northeast by next weekend in the global forecast system model. We get a storm forming along the US Gulf Coast on Sunday in the global forecast model system model. And these are longer range models, so you don't typically see this exactly happen, but it does show a tendency. And then the storm strengthens as it heads on to the north along the Mississippi River and Ohio valleys and up into the Great Lakes region, dragging another frontal system in by Tuesday of not next week, but the following week, so Tuesday, January 24th. And then we got another system forming here along the Gulf Coast region and starting to track on into the southeast and then providing another impulse here for the Outer Banks as prevailing stormy conditions remain over the Gulf Coast region. And then through the latter portion of the model, looks like another low forming tracking in through the Appalachians and then shifting eastward. A very interesting feature appears to me as a coastal low develops in the latter portions of the model and gets relatively strong here before exiting the East Coast. So it looks like we are going to see some better wave conditions for the Outer Banks over the next 3 days. Overall, stormier conditions predicted for the Outer Banks and US East Coast over the rest of January right now in the models. Something to keep an eye on. Thank you for joining me for this edition of the OBX Wave Report, the January 12 edition. And please remember to do everything you can to help accelerate the clean energy transition, to save our beautiful coastlines from the impacts of climate change driven by fossil fuel burning, and to just help us all enjoy a better future, better prospects for our future, for ourselves, for our families, for our friends, and for our children. So thank you for joining me again, and I will be back with you shortly with a big wave climate, extreme weather, and extreme weather roundup for January the 12th. So